Viewers like you make this program possible. Support your local PBS station.
The French Chef is made possible by a grant from Safeway stores.
Got it. There. Now, I can show you how to do small roast birds today on the French Chef. Welcome to the French Chef. I'm Julia Child. If you've been out hunting, either in the fields or in the supermarket and come home with a brace of small birds, I'm going to show you how to cook them in the classical French manner for small roast birds. You can do any kind of a small bird this way if you're a lucky hunter, the way I was. You can use woodcock, partridge, quail, grouse, or even pheasant this way. And these are hunted supermarket birds, they are squab or baby pigeons. And done this way, they're an absolute delight to eat. And you will see what a simple and elegant recipe it is. I have some birds now in the oven, and I'm going to baste them. That's one of the great secrets of roasting, in that you have to baste continually. And these should be really basted about every 5 or 6 minutes and turned and really roasted to the turn. And that, I guess, roasted to a turn means that you're turning and basting at the same time. But if you do that, you'll have lovely little birds. And now, these little squabs, which I like very much because they're so tender and juicy and it's all dark meat. You can buy them either fresh, like this, or you can buy them frozen, and they come in a little package like that. And to defrost frozen birds, you would leave them in their little package in the refrigerator for a good day until they completely soften up. But if you're in a hurry, you take them out of their little package and do what the professional poultry people do. You put them in a big basin of cold water. And as soon as they have defrosted enough so that you can take out the package of giblets, you take that out and then let the rest of the bird defrost inside. And the little package of giblets is part of your kitchen treasure also, because it contains the liver and the neck with which you make your sauce, and also the gizzard. So be sure that you keep everything that you find inside your bird. I'm going to put the livers aside because we're going to do a little canapé with them. If you've ever been in France during the fall hunting season, you will have seen perdreaux rôtis sur canapé, which means little roast partridges. And the canapé is toast with the liver on, and it's simply delicious. So when you get your squab, so you have this part of the wing with the tip, there's your elbow there, and there's the forearm, and this is like a great big hand, and that's mostly bony, and you don't eat that, so you just whack off that part of the wing, and you save that to make your stock with. Actually, with these tender little birds, there isn't any part of them that you don't use. And you would, if you were doing small chickens or any game birds, you would do them exactly the same way. And then you can fix them for roasting in either of 2 ways. And the first way is the French truss, which we've done several times with chicken and other birds. You get a trussing needle. This is just a great big needle. You can use a big embroidery or mattress needle and thread it with white thread. And then you want to attach the wings to the body. And so you just come right through the upper part of the wing and turn the bird around. and come through that way. And then, now where am I? Oh, there I am. Then come through the other way, and we want to attach the neck skin here to the back. I'm doing this somewhat in reverse, but it doesn't make any difference. The main thing is that we get the wings so they're attached. And you always want to use white string, because if you use colored string, it might have some kind of a dye in it. And then it might also dye the bird, which wouldn't be very nice. And then you tie that. See, there are always two ties, one at the top and one down at the bottom near the tail. And then these little birds like this, when they're so tender, they're usually not stuffed. They just have a little flavoring in them. And you use either some chopped scallion or chopped shallot and put about a teaspoon inside the cavity. And then put in a little bit of salt, about 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt. And then a little herbal flavoring, and with these little squabs, tarragon is extremely nice. If you had some of the other game birds, you might want to have a gamier herb like a thyme or Italian seasoning. I'm just putting a little pinch in there. And then also, so that it will be nice and moist inside, put in about a 1/2 tablespoon of butter. And then you want to fix the bottom so that all of that little flavoring will stay in. So you come underneath the tail with your needle. I think most of the French importing houses have these needles, but somebody told me they went to a big department store and found an embroidery needle, which worked just as well. Now see, I've come through the skin of the legs there, and then just tie it up. You'll use this same truss if you're using a regular stuffing. But I think you'll find that the birds cook quicker and are more juicy without a stuffing, particularly if they're the tender little birdies like this. See, that's all ready for cooking, and it looks very nice and neat. And now there's another system you can also use, which is, I'm going to get some more string. This is if you wanted to truss the bird this way, but you didn't have a needle. I'm just going to give you an idea of this. You tie the neck skin with your string, and then you pull it back, and then you just wind the string around the bird just to hold it in place, like that. But as we're going to cover these birds with some fat so that they will stay moist while they're roasting, we'll do one bird trussed in the French way, and then one just with the fat holding it together. And now, because these birds are very tender, and most of the game birds are tender also, you want to be sure that the breast is protected with fat. And you can use pork, fresh pork fat, and that's often very hard to find unless you're in one of the foreign markets. And if you have a nice butcher, the way I do, he will cut a little bit of very thin layer of fat off a roast of pork. And if you have a butcher that's not very nice, you'll just have to buy the roast of pork, and then you can cut the fat off very easily yourself. Otherwise, you can use bacon, which you have simmered for thick sliced fat bacon, which you've simmered for 10 minutes in water, and then rinsed in cold water and dried, because you want to be sure that you get the smoky taste out of the bacon, or else your birds would taste like bacon, but you still retain all of the fat. And that you can use, or you could use the suet from a roast of beef. And then when you're ready to put the fat on the bird, you take a little bit of butter and you give it a little butter massage, which is very good for it. And I shall massage both of these little birdies now. These are the kind of things that make all the difference in roasting, these little preliminary details. And you don't salt them first, because that may draw the juices out. Now I'll use this bacon on one bird, and you just put it over the breast like that, and then tie string around it. And that will hold the fat on and be sort of an automatic, it'll be an automatic basting as the bird roasts. And then just wind it around enough to hold the fat on, and you're ready to go. If you were going to do these little birds on a spit, which you could do very well, then you wouldn't have to baste them at all because the fat is basting them. And now here is one which we haven't tied at all, and I'll put this piece of pork fat, which I got from a pork roast, on top of it, and then just tie it up. It may turn out when you, well, the idea of the tie and the truss is to keep the wings and legs together while the bird is roasting. So it will look nicely when you serve it on the table, and all its legs and wings won't be spread apart in sort of a disarray. There, now that's tied on, and then just wind the string around, and I forgot to put the filling in that. This little very simple flavoring is very important because it flavors the bird as it cooks and sort of diffuses through the flesh. There's the salt, and I have to put my little tiny bit of butter in there, and then continue on with winding it up. This isn't as neat, but it works perfectly well if you don't have the right equipment. Main thing is if you have this little flavoring and you don't want it to come out while the bird is roasting. Now, one thing that you can always tell about how the age of a game bird is, you have your end of the breastbone and you feel it with your finger, and if it's a young bird, the breastbone is still supple and it's still cartilage. And if the bone is hard and stiff like regular bone all the way to the end, it shows that it's a bird that you really cannot roast. It has to be, you cannot roast in an open pan because it's too old. So you can always tell the age of the bird just by feeling that little end of the breastbone. That's true for chicken and duck and any game bird that you might have. And if you are a hunter and you feel that the breastbone is not soft this way, then you would cover roast it. You start out exactly the same way, and then you brown the bird, and you would then put it in a covered pan with some chopped carrots and onions. I'm going to put some chopped carrots and onions in here anyway because it always is going to give a good taste to the sauce. And then you'd put it in a little casserole that had a top on it so that when it was cooking, it would cook in its own steam and tenderize the bird much more it was cooking. That's a very good trick to know because it's a shame to have birds that are not tender when you can easily make them tender by cover roasting them. And now here are these birds now, and they've been in long enough so that I'm going to take the fat off the top so that the breasts will brown. If you leave the fat on, of course the breasts won't brown thoroughly, and you just allow, you keep the fat on until the very last minute, till about the last 5 minutes. And these are in a 400-degree oven, because these birds probably weigh just about a pound or less. And you want to cook them in a very fast, hot oven. There. And if you find that they're browning too quickly and they aren't done, then you would lower the oven down to 350. So those go in again for about 5 minutes more. These take about half an hour in all to do. And now you have your little wing tips and the necks and the gizzard, and these you use for your sauce base. And put a little bit of oil into a pan, and then saute your necks and wing tips. And one thing, always be sure if you're either roasting or sauteing, or those little birds were dry, but if they had been wet, if you just defrosted them, be sure that you dry them off. And those brown, and then put in some more of your carrots and onions to brown along with them. And then they'll be brown in about 4 or 5 minutes. And as soon as they're brown, put in some either beef stock or chicken stock. And you will find that this will be a very simple sauce base and be delicious for the final sauce that you make. So don't ever throw away these parts of the bird which are so delicious and are very much important to your final flavoring. And now we're going to make the canapes. And these canapes are little white bread which is sauteed in clarified butter. And here's melted butter. And you always hear about clarified butter, and I'll show you exactly what it is. This is just plain melted butter. And you notice there's scum on the top there. And underneath, there's always sort of a little milky substance, which is called in France le petit lait. And this clear part here is clarified butter. And the reason you want to use clarified butter when you're sauteing bread is that it's the scum and the that petit lait or white stuff down below which darken and speckle in the butter. Now, this is regular white bread, and be sure that you use homemade type of bread, not that squashy bread, because it doesn't have any body, and you cut the crusts off. And then cut the bread into rectangles, and then when your butter is hot, you just put the bread in and you saute it very briefly until it's just lightly browned on each side. And that only takes a minute or two, and you can get that all done ahead of time. As a matter of fact, I think with the preliminaries, it's best to do all of them ahead of time, because your sauce should really cook for about, an hour or two to get the full benefit out of the wingtips and the giblets that you've put in. And then turn your bread when it's, see that's just browned on that one side. And be sure that you add enough butter. You may find that, because if you don't add enough, it burns or gets sort of like toast on the bottom rather than looking like little bread rounds. Like this sort of buttery canapé. Then as soon as that is all done, they go onto a little plate. Then we're going to fix our livers. There. Then, here's the liver. Now this gets also chopped up with some fresh pork fat or some fresh bacon, and you use about the same amounts. So I'll use not quite all of that. Then this just gets chopped into a puree, and I think using a great big knife is the easiest way to do it. I've also got the hearts in there too. See that? It's got to be really chopped as though it were a puree. And then you mix that in a little bowl and season it up. See how useful these great big knives are. You can just do everything with them. And then I guess I can remove this chopping board now. And then you flavor up this liver. You put in a little bit of cognac, if you like, just a few drops of it. And then a little bit of Madeira or port. If you use Madeira, be sure that you get the dry Madeira called Cercial. That's S-E-R-C-I-A-L. Madeira is always fairly expensive, but it has a lovely flavor, and it's a very French flavor. And then put in some pepper, about 2 or 3 good grinds of pepper, and a little bit of salt. And you can put some herbs in if you want. And then, because the liqueur has softened that up, put in a little bit of white breadcrumbs, because you have to have it so that it is of spreading consistency. And then you put this on your canapes, and all of this too can be done ahead of time. And then you're going to see what happens to these. And then after the birds are roasted, they sit on these little canapes, and the liver is all cooked. This is, you can be just as, do the same fancy thing if you have small broiled chicken. And be sure that you cover the canapes well, because these are going to be broiled, and if it's not completely covered, the bread will burn a little bit. So now they're ready for broiling. So I'll broil them right now. And this, again, you can do ahead of time. And this is going to go in into a heated broiler. It'll take just about a minute. So I'm going to set my timer. And when it goes doing, the canapes will be done. And in the meantime, our birds are now done. Now it's little roast birds like this that they be just done to a turn and not overdone. And these you really shouldn't do ahead of time. You should take them out of the oven just about when you're going to serve them. And now there's some fat in the pan, and that gets poured out. And you still have your carrots and onions here. You leave just a little tiny bit of it in, and you have doing. There goes the bell. I'll have to get those canapes out. There, now see, that just takes about a minute to a minute and a half if you have them very close under the broiler, and they're all ready. You can do those ahead and reheat them. Then we'll get back to our sauce. Now you have your sauce base. I have some here that I've already made, and that's cooked for about 2 hours, and that just goes right into the pan. And then that is to cook down, and then all the roasting juices and the brown carrots and onions go into the sauce. A little bit of string. Doesn't hurt it at all, but I'll take it out anyway. There. And then that boils down, and then while that's boiling down, we will cut the birds. So we have our canapes, and they go onto the serving platter, and the serving platter is hot. And there's one canapé and two. I'm going to cut these birds in half. You can, it makes them easier to eat, and you can use one bird for 2 people or one bird apiece, depending on what else you have served. So those go off to the side. And then the birds. And these can just be cut right in half. There's a little bit of carrot there. And just cut them right in half. And you can tell when they're done, they cook very quickly by poking them with a fork, and the juice should run clear yellow. With squabs, you can serve them a little tiny bit underdone, so that the juice runs a little bit rosy. It just depends on how you like them. And some birds take a little bit longer, like those little game hens. They usually take 45 minutes to an hour. There goes our other bird in half. Of course, if you have a stuffing in them, it takes a bit longer, and I really think it dries the bird out. And when you have the squab, which is so delicate, I think it's a shame to allow it to overcook. Now, look back at our sauce. Ooh, that's hot. One thing, this is a nice pan for roasting, because you can use it either as a frying pan or as a roaster. But you have to remember to keep a pot holder ready because of the handle. Now that, we want also now to put a little bit of wine in it. You can cook all of these without wine, but it's much more French to put it in. I'm going to put in a little bit of Madeira, probably 2 or 3 tablespoons, and then let that cook a little bit. Whenever you're using wine, you want to be sure to let it boil off all the alcohol, because if the alcohol is still there, it's a very unpleasant taste. And what you're not interested in the alcohol, you're interested in the flavor of the wine. And Madeira has a very special flavor, which is very French. And now there's going to be a little thickening to the sauce, which will be our dear old friend cornstarch. I'm going to put in about a teaspoon of cornstarch, and then I'll put in a little bit of brandy in with that. Or you could use a little bit of cold stock if you like. But I think it's a good thing for you to see everything that you can use. Then take your sauce off of heat, and in goes your cornstarch, and then that has to cook for a moment or two. And then it's ready to go over the birds. And I think that's thickened up a little bit, so I'm going to put in a little bit more stock. You see, with most of these things, a recipe isn't terribly necessary. After you've done it or see it done, you sort of play it by ear, because you can always thin it out again if necessary. And then our sauce is almost ready, and we have here some sautéed mushrooms. These are fresh mushrooms which were quartered, then sautéed in butter with a little bit of oil, and then finished off with just a little tiny bit of shallot or scallion, and then a little, what they call une pointe d'ail, just a little point of garlic, and that makes a very nice accompaniment. And those go around the birds. I'll take this sauce off a little bit now. Then put your sauce over the birds, and if you like, you can, just at the end, you can spoon in a little bit of butter and swirl it into your pan. And then any sauce that you have left, you can serve in a little sauce boat. And you can also, if you like, decorate the platter with watercress, the way we have here. We have here our small roast birds with watercress and parsley and mushrooms around. And this is kind of a dinner that you really don't need to have any vegetables with, except, say, some home fried potato chips or shoestring potatoes and some French bread. And with squab, you would serve a nice red Bordeaux wine. If you had a game birds, you would serve a red Burgundy. But don't, if you're having wine, a lovely wine with your main course, do not serve salad with it. Wait and finish your wine, and then serve the salad later. So what gives elegance to this essentially simple dish is that each element is very carefully cooked, and the birds are thoroughly basted and cooked to a turn. This is an example of French cooking at its best, I think. So that's all for today on The French Chef. This is Julia Child. Bon appétit.
Julia Child is co-author of the book Mastering the Art of French Cooking.